Good morning and welcome to the Alabama Works webinar series, a monthly webinar designed to provide information and speakers related to the workforce in Alabama. Past webinars are available on the AlabamaWorks website at alabamaworks.com. And now let me hand this over to our host, Tim McCartney, Chair of the Alabama Workforce Council.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the June 12th Alabama Workforce Council monthly webinar. Today, we're going to have a quick-paced lineup of 5 speakers who are going to cover a lot of ground quickly, so sort of buckle up and get ready to learn a lot. First up, we're going to have Nick Moore, who's the Director of the Governor's Office of Education and Workforce Transformation, and he will provide us a monthly review on labor report in Alabama. And then next, we'll have Mr. Otto Catt, who's principal of Lewis Burke Associate, and he's going to talk to us about the workforce issues on the federal level. Mr. Catt provides strategic guidance on legislative, administrative, and regulatory issues at the Department of Labor and Education in D.C. Following Mr. Catt, Mr. Donnie Jones, who is Executive Director of the West Alabama Works, will provide us an update on workforce-related events happening in Region 3. And as those of you who know Donnie, he's always got a lot going on. Following Donnie, we have Mr. Josh Blades, who is Senior Advisor of Governmental Affairs and Economic Development with Bradley, Arendt, Bolt and Cummings, LLC in Birmingham, and will discuss workforce housing issues. And last but not least, we have Dr. Vic Wilson, who's the Executive Director of the Council for Leaders in Alabama Schools, and he's going to provide us an update on the recent principal bill from the House, from the legislature. So without further ado, Nick, please bring us up to date on the labor report.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll talk first about the labor force participation rate and unemployment rate for April 2023, which is the latest data we have. If we always seem to be in about a month or about a week away from having the most recent data. So we'll have the May data by the end of the week. And we've got, as you may have heard, historically low unemployment, but we tend to focus in these times of full employment on the labor force participation rate. And really what I'd like to just lay down and say today is that we've honestly got a negative unemployment rate. When you've got more open jobs than you have people that are claiming unemployment, that's really considered a negative unemployment rate, not in the pejorative sense, but just in the sense that it's no longer a metric that for workforce developers is a guidepost for the health of the labor market. So that's why we've got really, in these times of full employment or even a negative unemployment rate, to tend to look at the labor force participation rate. And as you could see across the region, we are, except for a couple of our neighbors like Mississippi and South Carolina and Kentucky, is just a little bit ahead of us there, but we are near the bottom of the Southeast and nationally on labor force participation. So we continue to focus on that. And we focus on that, as you'll see here, by setting goals around each of our special populations and trying to braid funding and empower local folks that are actually doing the work in the regions like Mr. Jones. And I know he's got some good programs to share about today that are focused on labor force participation. But we've got to look at the shadow labor force and the idea that who are the people that could be working today but are facing some barrier. And so that has to be the message that each agency of government is talking about, and how we are holding ourselves accountable and how we're judging success. How many people are we training, getting a credential that's aligned with the job they've been trained for, and getting them a job? And that's what workforce development is about. And sometimes we can tend to focus on a lot of esoteric topics and things like that, but workforce development is about unlocking potential by training people and getting them employed in an in-demand job that leads to self-sufficiency. Everything else is important, but if we think about it in military terms, We've got to have more people on the front line actually in combat. And in combat in these terms means helping people eliminate benefits cliffs and helping people get trained. If we look at the past year for our labor force participation rate, it's vacillated up and down and pretty much held constant. And we've been held constant around 57% really over the last decade. And if you go back into the 90s, we were up past 60%. And if you look at labor force participation nationally, it has gone up a little bit over the past year, but also has remained pretty flat. And there's fewer people working due to lower labor force participation rate. So we also have come up with our new special population estimates for this year. And so this is the special population counts for each special population and the numbers for the state and by region. And we also have broken these down for the remainder of our special, or for our Success Plus post-secondary education attainment goal. So we've got about 250,000 left to go for our 500,000. And if we break this down by region and statewide, this is our goal for 23 to 25. And now here we've broken it down for an annual goal. So our annual goal is 125,000. So this is what each region would need to see, and then statewide for this year to hit our annual goal. And here's our annual labor force participation rate goals. So this is how many people in each of these special population groups we need to see get into the labor force to hit our target for this year. And 1 percentage point of labor force participation increase is about 23,000 people, and 1% of the civilian population is about 50,000. We recently did a survey last month, and I don't know why that says 2022 on there, but it was certainly in 2023. And what we wanted to do is gauge the interest of folks that are earning an hourly wage, and to determine what kind of gaps they were facing and accessing supportive services. And as you may have seen during the legislative session, there was a bill passed that would allow hourly workers to not have to pay state taxes on overtime. And there was a cap on that at $2,000, but the governor actually sent over an executive amendment that eliminated that cap, and the legislature concurred with that. So that's going to be a big boon to folks working an hourly wage, and coupled with some of the other things like elimination of, or phasing out rather, of the grocery tax, and then the rebate of $150 folks will be getting. There's going to be a lot of relief for folks working hourly wages. There's other things though that we know that we've got to work on, like childcare and transportation. I know Mr. Blades will be on here talking about transportation. There was a bill that was supported by a lot of industry groups on childcare that didn't get quite across the finish line. I know there'll be other bills like that that will probably come back up next session. So these things continue to be important. And I think what's even better now, as you see things being done in the legislature by the governor, by the Workforce Council, to actually address childcare and transportation. There was a phase where it always came up, but there was not a coalescence around a particular policy, and I think we're still not quite there on a few of these things, but we're getting closer. So there was 408 people that responded to this panel. It was an online panel of all Alabamians that were people that were hourly workers. Now here's some of the insights that we found here. Lot of dispersion across sectors, which of course is good to get a more representative sample. Just under half had a child or a dependent under 18, and childcare was very important to 63%. 14% of folks, their employers provided childcare vouchers, and 11% received some kind of government aid. 31% received family or community support. And I think that's a role that in a lot of these conversations gets missed, is what the important role of micro child care facilities or family care. And that's over a third of the people said that was important. 52% have missed work because they don't have child care. And parents most frequently drive their children to school at 38%, and only 21% rely solely on the school bus. So transportation is an issue, as 13% say they do not have reliable transportation to work, and nearly 6 in 10 workers have missed work due to their car breaking down. And I think I said Josh was talking about he's talking about housing, which also is an important issue. Transportation, housing, and childcare are kind of the big three. So, but we've talked about transportation before, and we'll talk about that again before we are done. So, so about 13% don't have reliable transportation. 35% have access to public transportation. That's mostly in urban areas, while 57% do not have access. And public transportation has a lot of challenges in rural areas due to density and just due to the length of time that people would have to ride from place to place. And then the fact that there's so much cost to maintain a network because of the rurality and the wear and tear, and then just the fewer riders. So it's very challenging. Half of workers drive 30 minutes or less, and a third of the workers have lost or quit due to transportation issues. 40% have paid out of pocket for their jobs, which costs $100 to $500 per year. So that could be anything from uniforms to steel toe boots to training to getting some kind of a serve safe certification or some other type of occupational license. And when it comes to knowledge about getting childcare transportation assistance, just 40% of workers are aware, and 60% are unaware. So that's so what I think to me is the big through point for this is that nothing new on the fact that transportation, childcare are important issues. I think what is valuable from this survey is how much information asymmetry there is, that people are saying this is very important, but also are saying they don't know how to access the information. So for us that are working on these issues in this arena, we've got to, on these issues, come up with a more cogent strategy for making people aware of whatever childcare transportation resources might be available to them. And lastly, 15% of workers have delayed starting a new job due to losing assistance. So that's where benefit cliffs come in. And that's where things like our David tool with the Federal Reserve comes in. And that's why we're trying to work very closely with the State Workforce Board to make sure that we go from an unrestricted customer choice model to an informed or structured choice model when we do the intake and assessment for WIOA programs. Because people, just like, and a lot of times younger people may not know all the things that are out there. Manufacturing is more like a lab than a factory now, but a lot of people still think that the factory is some dark place. And so a lot of information asymmetry also about career awareness. And so it's not that through the WIOA system that we want to make somebody work in the sprocket factory because they happen to live next to it, or that we're trying to track people. But at the same time, people are not aware of all of the different jobs that are available. And all we want to do is make sure that we are providing that awareness. And at the end of the day, it's up to the individual to choose a training program that meets their needs, but also it's up to the state to set standards, and that we don't want to train people and use our funds on ITAs for jobs that are not in demand. And so that goes in both directions. So there's a lot that we're doing on the WIOA system, but that's just the tip of the spear. I mean, that's only $40 million out of the $8.8 billion that we spend on education at the state level. So these are things that we've got to look at across the board. And so that's why we're also glad that Act 2023-365 passed the Non-Degree Credential Quality and Transparency Act that codified our atlas on career pathways so we can begin seeing data across programs so that we know, for example, do students that complete our first class pre-K program have higher results on the ACAP when they're in the 3rd grade? Does that stay with them or does it fade out in the 8th grade on the ACAP? And what are the results of people that complete a educator prep program or an apprenticeship? So these are all things that we can begin looking at outcomes rather than just inputs in regard to programs. And that also will begin to make its way towards workforce programs too. That bill also codifies our non-degree credential transparency committee, which will provide a list of all of the credentials of value that are linked to our in-demand jobs. And so that will help the public be more aware of what jobs are out there. And then Senator Orr sponsored a bill. I don't think it's been assigned an act number yet, but it's SB 176 called the Student Right to Know Act that will provide a dashboard and information about all of the different education training programs provided by 2- and 4-year colleges and the employment outcomes associated with those. And there's going to be a data sharing agreement between AIC and the Department of Commerce to facilitate that dashboard. So all in all, I think it was a pretty good session when it comes to, again, opening up the conversation for childcare and transportation and other issues around supportive services, but also around things like short-term credentials, and with SB 175, for example, and then with the Non-Degree Credential Quality and Transparency Act, to make sure that as we have more programs under 16 weeks funded at the state level because they're not eligible for Pell, that we understand the quality of those programs and that we try to make those into stackable credentials so that people can end up with terminal associate and bachelor's degrees if they want those over a period of time. So turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to share with you today.
Well, thank you, Nick. Appreciate all that good information. I always appreciate your report. So moving on, we have Mr. Otto Catt, who's principal for Lewis Burke Associates in Washington, D.C. Otto, good morning and take it away.
Morning. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you all today. Let me share. Just got one slide. Is that coming through for you all? Is that slide showing up?
Yes, it's good.
Perfect. Great. So just would actually like to focus mainly on taking any questions here at the federal level, but we'll highlight briefly some of the workforce development opportunities that have been occurring and coming out of DC over the last couple of years. Certainly has been a lot. If you look there on the left side, bipartisan infrastructure law was really focused on surface transportation, a lot of funding there, ranging, everything from your sort of, we'll call it traditional building highways, et cetera, to even electrification, public transportation. Woven into a lot of those funds are opportunities for workforce development. I think one of the biggest one is Department of Transportation calls it their Section 504 workforce program. These are funds that go to state departments of transportation, a change from previous surface transportation iterations where 100% of funding could be used to go for workforce development versus some splits or matches that had happened in the past. I think on the CHIPS and Science Act, really want to focus on the semiconductor side. This was $52 billion that went out or is in the process of going out from the Department of Commerce. There's a little bit of semiconductor efforts, I know, kind of scattered across the country. A lot of attention is often on states like Ohio and California, say Texas, Arizona. But I will say the department and the administration and Congress have really been taking a whole supply chain approach. So this is everything from manufacturing those chips to actually packaging them. So the whole breadth there. I really want to call attention to that arrow that sort of undergirds this whole the buckets that make up the CHIPS and Science Act. We've heard consistently Secretary Raimundo, the Secretary for Commerce, regularly talks about workforce development. If you're going to look at who's going to work in these fabrication facilities or in a lot of these efforts. As Nick alluded to, the factories of today are not dark, dirty, dingy places. And a lot of these opportunities and these fabs and in this sector and associated industries, are technician level, may require anything from a certificate to an associate's degree. Certainly, your engineers and chip designers are going to be higher on the education requirement side, bachelor's, PhDs, et cetera. But a lot of opportunities, and again, workforce development, key to any efforts. I'll call out two of the buckets here. Those manufacturing incentives. So that's, your private sector entities going after some of these tax credits, some of these grants are going to be required to submit a workforce development plan. How are they going to work with local workforce stakeholders? Depending on the size, how are they actually going to provide childcare for these facilities? So I think a really holistic approach to that. And on the R&D side, again, I know a lot of your institutions of higher education, both four-year community colleges, likely involved and interested, and a real sense of, if we're going to onshore U.S. manufacturing semiconductors, we used to make a whole bunch of chips here, and that's really dropped. We're going to need that workforce to support it. So I think a lot of interesting opportunities, really family sustaining wages in that sector. The last one of what we've already seen pass into law, these were really big DC bills, the Inflation Reduction Act, a lot of work on registered apprenticeship tax credits, but also some of the energy efficiency work as well. So I know you all have some electrification, EV type efforts underway in the state, and there will be some opportunities in that space. Energy efficiency is another sector. How do we train individuals to help make sure that be it a manufacturing facility, be it even a single family home, how are these buildings energy efficient, and you need a workforce to help do that as well. Shifting to the right side of the slide, the Department of Commerce Economic Development Agency has been extremely active in the workforce development space. I know you all have some experience, Good Jobs Challenge Award winner in the state, focus on healthcare. The Build Back Better, I know there was a finalist for you all as well. These are really going to be replicated in what the administration and what Congress have been trying to do with regional technology hubs. How do we take the successes we as a nation have seen in Silicon Valley or Austin and Boston and bring that to a place like Alabama or anywhere else across the country? How do we make sure that technology innovation is not really concentrated in these superstar cities? So we have seen the early stages of this opportunity roll out. These are going to require economic development organizations, are going to require workforce boards, et cetera, to be partners, require a lot of stakeholders, and again, a real effort here of how do we make sure economic development, workforce development are spreading across communities. The EDA Recompete program, we have not seen this opportunity come out yet, but we should see a funding opportunity pretty soon. This one's an interesting one, really focus on how do you tackle these communities where we've seen just persistent high unemployment of around what we're calling prime age, 25 to 50-year-old employment gap. So these efforts have been around for a while, and in DC we've seen efforts around how do we call persistent poverty communities, or again efforts to really tackle sometimes what can seem really difficult to move the needle in populations, a lot of those special populations that Nick talked about previously. The last one I'll flag here is the National Science Foundation Regional Innovation Engines. Again, very interesting to see, for those of you who have been doing workforce development, you'll notice I have not called out any Department of Labor opportunities here, and that's frustrating, to be honest, but I think still opportunities. We've really seen other federal agencies like the Department of Commerce, like the National Science Foundation, really come in and say, hey, our success as a nation, our, be it national security, economic security, national competitiveness, global competitiveness is dependent on our, technological supremacy. And that only comes if we're making investments in, fields like advanced artificial intelligence or advanced manufacturing or clean energy. And so a real emphasis here of we're just not going to send money to, help find the next technological breakthrough. We're going to need to make sure we have that workforce who can then enact it. And so a real range here, these tech hubs are really going to be aimed at, hey, do you have an existing industry that we can help get across the finish line and really accelerate? engines are definitely more on the early stage of sort of what we call technological readiness, the sense of, hey, we got an idea here, and maybe with a little bit of seed funding, a little better cooperation and collaboration, we can help accelerate these efforts. But again, I think really exciting to see a real emphasis on regional approaches from the federal level, a real emphasis on how do we take economic development, workforce development entities and get them talking to agencies maybe they hadn't to in the past, and really how do we just help accelerate economic security through investments. So I will end my share there, and happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Well, Otto, appreciate that presentation. That's a lot of good information. We're the way we handle questions on this is we have people send their questions to our Alabama Workforce or Alabama Works site, and then we will forward them to you. So we don't do the live questions, but
All right.
we tried that early on and it didn't work very well. So that's the way we go now. But thank you so much for being with us. We'd love for you to come back and give us an update as we go along with these new programs. So thanks again for joining us, and we appreciate you. Next up, we have Mr. Donnie Jones from West Alabama Works, Region 3. Donnie, I know you got a lot going on. You always do. So educate us this morning.
Fantastic. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I hope this works. Well, real quick, I just want to share some of our overviews. You can see some of the things that are happening in our region. I know there's a lot going on, but also an alignment with the regional councils and the Alabama Workforce Council and the work that Nick's doing, particularly with the data, and really looking at how do we get very strategic in every single decision that we make. Here's an example of some of the data. At any one time, we actually track how many people are in our system, how many jobs we're actually posting, where they're coming from, the total numbers of job placements, like in one of our OEM projects this past year, we're over 4,000 right now, currently in this year in that one project. And then also how many text messages are taking place, how much communication is going to and from our job seekers and our navigation team. So you can see at the very bottom in the corner there, year to date, there's over 143,000 text messages that's been going back and forth. And our job seekers, of course, Nick has been talking about how do we track the difference between our unemployment rate and the real number we need to be focused on, which is our participation rate. But all of that means, what does all that mean? Well, it means how many people are we helping? And I just pulled from this morning a couple of emails that came in from job seekers. I'm interested in a trade program with welding certification. So we're seeing constant, here's another one that came in just this morning, people that need jobs. So there's people that are still out there working, but now how do we use this non-participation rate to really narrow in and focus on what we have to do to move the needle? So I'll give you an example. When you look at the overall strategy of what we do, it focuses in two areas. One is the metro area where the majority of the jobs are, which are in Tuscaloosa for our region. But then we have 8 other counties, which are rural counties. And so that's where the majority of our worker population is coming from a strategic plan of getting more people focused on the workforce. If you look at most of our metro areas, the participation rate in most areas are higher, particularly much higher than in our rural counties. But here's an example of how we're looking at this data. When you start breaking down the non-participation rate, which is calculated from 16 to death, you really begin to see what the participation rates really are when it's coming to your working age. So if you look at that third column there, you'll see that taking the 16 to 19-year-olds out, and that's not that they're not in the workforce, and I'll share that in just a minute, but then you look at 20 to 65, that participation rate is around 62.5%. Now, looking at a population, when you look at what the general population is, that's great, but when you look at the over 65, 25% in this one county is over 65. And most of the jobs that we have do not hire individuals over 65. They will, I'm not saying that they won't, but the majority of individuals are not being hired 65 and over. So 25% of that non-participation rate for that one county is out of the game unless you're placing them in different types of jobs. But rural counties, it's usually pulp and paper, it's manufacturing, and there are some hospitality and tourism jobs and healthcare jobs. But the majority of those, as you can see in this data, don't really compile to what we're trying to focus in getting people to work. And then you look at 6.8% of the population is 16 to 19. They're in high school. So really focusing on that yellow area that we see there. Then you look at a population trend of Tuscaloosa, and 20 to 64, your labor participation rate really is 73.5% of those that are focused on the key areas that we're placing people to work. Doesn't mean we're not putting 16 to 19. It doesn't mean we're not placing 60 and older in jobs. It just is our focus when you look at the majority of job opportunities. So how do we focus? And looking at that, now you're looking at focusing on 20% non-participation rate, and in some cases 15% non-participation rate. So how do you do that? Then you look at our rural counties like we just talked about a minute ago, and you see in that key area, which is about 20 to 25%, there's a lot of people who have felonies and have a real problem finding jobs. So we've created a program called Building Hope Alabama. And you can see the participation since we launched it in March, on March 1st, over 1,500 individuals have submitted, or 1,500 applications have submitted. 38 companies are involved in this program. And we have over 110 job postings for those who have a felony, a justice impacted past. And then we have over almost 100 that have been hired in this area. Now, if you look at the numbers that Nick had shared a few minutes ago, we need to get over 300 individuals hired that are justice impacted, and we're already heavily focused on some of the things that Nick has said that we need to focus on. I'll share some other data with you. This is another program that we have, which ties to all that. And you can see how many participants we had there, over 117, 14 companies. And that is a partnership between the DA's office and the judges in West Alabama Works. And then this is a third program that really focuses on those who are justice impacted. And that is our Second Chance program. These are individuals who haven't gotten a felony yet. They've been convicted, but they're actually, for better, like a better term, the DA's office and the judges are actually sentencing them to West Alabama Works. So we have 279 participants in that. We have 50 completers. All of those completers have jobs. 17 plus were terminated. Those numbers are about 2 months old. There's over 300 in the program right now, and you can see the numbers there. Because of our work on justice impacted, we are one of 6 sites that have been chosen by the federal government to actually do a study on employment in the Deep South, particularly for those impacted by the criminal system, and then also those in the minority community. And we're doing a presentation in the next couple of weeks in Birmingham on that particular topic. The other thing that you see is the other issue that we're talking about is how do we get more of our teenagers? Alabama has one of the highest unemployment rates when it comes to our teenagers. How do we get people from not being in the non-participation rate? We get them involved in employment at an early age. And this is something that we're very committed with the partners with the Tuscaloosa County system. You can say we have 881 students registered. They have submitted over 1,800 job applications for those 95 posted positions. Each one of those posted positions could be 20 to 100 jobs. Here's another example of the Ignite program where we had a job fair for our high school students, and we're also tied into our co-op programs within our 12 school systems. But you also see the employers there, and there was 216 contingent job offers for those students. Also our WOW program, I'm trying to watch our time, Tim, I don't want to get the hook. But we see our WOW program that's tied to that as well. You can see the numbers there. Our WOW 2.0, you can see that there was over 610 contingent job offers for our seniors graduating. Our signing day that we actually do, and you can see the excitement there from the parents, how they're taking pictures, they're screaming, they're yelling, they're excited about their students going directly into the workforce and into apprenticeship jobs. Here's some of our student job programs, our modern manufacturing in our region. You can see all of the numbers there, the participation all over the state. Here's some of our tracking numbers that you can see just from January to April of 2023. But the number down there in the bottom left-hand side is so important. We've had 1,700 new job seeking individuals enter our system and are seeking jobs. Here's some of our outreach events that are taking place, because it's about going into the highways and byways and actually connecting to individuals. So we're out there with our vans doing outreach events and making sure we're churning people. That's why we have over 26,000 individuals in our Career Connect system now. Here's some of the speaking events we've been at in the last 30 days across the country. Just got this email this morning. This is from a city councilman in Chesapeake, Virginia, where they have launched a WOW event. We've done a lot of training for communities all over the country, and this is one of the last thank yous that we've gotten, and they're actually expanding the event to multiple communities, and they had over 34 students. Once again, here's a big thing that we were hearing all the data. Our big thing is, how do we get more people involved in the workforce? We got to solve the child care issue. And so we have a program called 3x3 with Shelton State Community College and several other partners that we actually are focused on creating child care for manufacturing and industry. If you look at what people actually are wanting, they want child care close to their home when you're in manufacturing. Blue collar, gray collar wants their child care close to their homes. White collar wants it close to their work. So we're focused on developing new child care opportunities for individuals to launch in-home daycares. And so we're launching those. We've had our first training. The next one's going on right now. And we're actually developing these types of child care opportunities across the Black Belt and in our impoverished communities in our metro areas as well. So that's one of the ways that we're focused on that. And then I'll let Josh talk a little bit more about the issues that we have with affordable housing. But I'll share these 2 points for Josh to kind of hit the road with. That is, how much can people really afford? And that's the study that we've done. And we can actually calculate and tell you how much we're actually doing. And then also the third thing that we're working on is a program with Hopped In, which really focuses on the transportation needs. So Tim, I'll turn it back over to you. And I was just a few minutes over, and I apologize for that.
No apology necessary. Great job, Donnie. As always, you've got a lot more to share with us than we have time. So we'll circle back to you later date. Thanks again. And moving on, Josh Blades, Senior Advisor for Bradley Arant, is going to talk to us about workforce housing. Good morning, Josh.
Tim, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. You sound great.
My apologies. I'm joining you from a conference room in Orlando. So you may have people coming in and out, but y'all, I just want to start off by saying thank you to Tim and Nick and Donnie. I mean, the work that y'all are doing on workforce is just incredible. And, you know, y'all are the thought leaders in this industry, and you're moving the needle. So I just want to publicly thank you all for your hard work on this issue, and y'all keep it up, because without people like you pushing, nothing is going to happen at the state level on the executive branch or the legislative branch. So many thanks to y'all. So as Tim mentioned, I'm Josh Blades. I'm with Bradley Law Firm, do government affairs work for Bradley, and I represent the Workforce Housing Coalition. The coalition includes multifamily housing developers, the Realtors Association, a number of banks, major banks throughout the state. And look, these groups are all interested in expanding workforce housing in the state. The coalition is proposing a program to grow workforce housing availability in the state. You know, as we talk with companies and economic developers throughout the state, we're constantly hearing that there are three main barriers to unlocking the workforce: transportation, childcare, housing. Obviously, you know, we just heard about this issue from Donnie. You know, I've heard Chairman McCartney and Nick Moore say similar things that they've heard out there on the street based on surveys of Alabama workers and employers. It's clear that housing's an issue. Obviously, housing prices and rents have increased significantly since the pandemic. HUD has indicated that rents in Alabama have increased by almost 20% since the pandemic. This increase is hitting blue collar workers particularly hard, and that's what our bill seeks to address. The coalition's proposal creates a tax credit that helps developers draw down underutilized federal funds to build and rehab multifamily workforce housing in the state. And again, the target here is true blue collar and service industry workers, people making between $9 and $18 an hour, or 30 to 60% of area median income. Just to give you an example, 60% of AMI is around $51,000 for a family of 4 in Jefferson County. Most of these families are either single income or have one full-time income and one part-time income. The part-time is likely a caregiver of some sort. We're talking light truck drivers, construction workers, retail workers, home health workers, nursing assistants. And we're also talking about people who just started their career. There are more than 185,000 Alabama renters who fall within this eligibility range. 71,000 of those are currently rent burdened. And, Donnie, I'd love to see the affordability data that you've just flashed up on the screen. Maybe you and I can do a little deeper dive into that, because, Nick and I were talking about this yesterday, or I guess it was Friday. We really would like to get as much data as we can on affordability. There's not a ton out there, but the data that we do have indicates that the need for this program is tremendous. So here's how it works. Developers get a tax credit for building these developments, and in return, they agree to cap their rent at 30% of AMI. So this provides high quality housing to workers at affordable rates. The program's modeled after a Reagan era housing plan that leverages private capital to develop rent capped housing. But here's the best part. The program allows Alabama to draw down hundreds of millions of dollars in existing federal private activity bonds that currently aren't being utilized. With the state program and the federal private activity bonds and the developers funds are financing, this program would create up to 7,500 new and rehabbed housing units throughout the state. Kayvon Darabi has done an economic analysis on the program. He's concluded that constructing and running these developments will create about $3.3 billion in economic activity and 9,000 direct jobs. The Housing Finance Authority would administer the program, and they've got extensive experience in administering similar federal programs, including the Reagan era program that I just mentioned. Additionally, this program is actually designed to support the economic and workforce development in the state, as we've already discussed, and actually has some specific provisions for coordination with the Alabama Department of Commerce. Y'all, many of our competitors are already ahead of us on this issue. Our sister southeastern states, Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee all have tax credit programs similar to the one that I just described. Florida has a low interest loan program. Additionally, Oklahoma, Missouri, Indiana, and a number of others throughout the country also have these types of tax credit programs. As I mentioned, this is for multifamily developments, and some have asked, well, why not single family homes? Why not encourage home ownership? And I would argue that this is not an either or proposition. I believe both are important parts of the housing puzzle. But here's the reality. There's currently no other program that I'm aware of which provides the bang for the buck that this one does. We're leveraging hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government with private dollars. And we're matching that up with state investment, which maximizes the amount of units that we can develop. Additionally, as y'all know, multifamily housing helps younger people who don't have the ability to make a down payment on a house, so they can work their way into home ownership. For others who may be moving to new jobs, maybe we're attracting people from outside the state of Alabama. I know, Tim, that's been a real push from the Department of Commerce and for you guys at the Workforce Council. This provides readily available housing as they determine what their, ultimate housing preference is here for the long term. And all right, I know what you're thinking. All right, Josh, this sounds great, but what's the cost? So this is a big deal, a big program. The program will ramp up to $45 million per year over 3 years. So $15 million in year one, $30 million in year two, and $45 million in year three. It'll last for around 10 years, at which point it will sunset. But see, this $45 million a year will allow the state to leverage an additional $160 million per year in federal and private money to construct the 7,500 housing units that we're talking about. As I'm sure you've heard from your stakeholders, affordable housing is key to increasing workforce participation and helping y'all and helping the governor meet her goal of 500,000 new workers by 2025. But, as I've heard a number of people in the economic development world say, there's a need, but we haven't been able to find an affordable option that just isn't another entitlement program. Well, the Workforce Coalition believes that this public-private partnership is a major part of the solution. We plan to bring legislation next year to address this issue. And of course, we'd love to have your input as we move forward. So, Tim, I know we're not taking questions right now, but if y'all do have any questions for me, don't hesitate to shoot Tim or me an email. Would be happy to interact with you to discuss this further.
Well, thanks, Josh. I appreciate that. That's great information, and we'd love to work with y'all and collaborate with you. And I know Donnie's got a lot of information for West
Donnie
Alabama.
always has a lot of information.
He does. He does. He's always ready. So I'd love to talk to you offline and maybe see if we can maybe form some sort of committee to help support this. Okay.
That sounds great. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for taking your time out of your conference.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks so much. Our next speaker this morning is Dr. Vic Wilson, who's also attending a conference this morning down in Mobile. So thanks, Dr. Wilson, for joining us in such a busy time for you. So bring us up to date on the principal bill.
Good morning. Thank you very much. As Josh said, I'm at a conference, so you may hear announcements coming over. We're about to have a door prize drawing. So if one of y'all hear your name, you may win a door prize too. So you never know. I also want to echo what Josh said about the importance of the work you guys are doing. I really appreciate that. It's very important for our students who come out of our K-12 schools to be able to have the proper option for them as they move forward into society, and the college and or career or both is very important. So we really appreciate the work y'all are doing. We have worked very hard in the last couple of years. We've had a Literacy Act passed and a Numeracy Act, and this Principal Leadership Mentoring Act is kind of the third leg of that stool that we have been working to get passed, and it's been very impactful, has an opportunity to be very impactful moving forward. The School Principal Leadership and Mentoring Act, which was carried by Senator Orr in the Senate and Representative Baker in the House, was something that we worked on with all entities and groups. I worked closely. I spoke with Nick on a number of occasions. I worked with Representative Collins. We worked with all of the educational entities, SSA, AASB, the State Department. A+ College Ready was instrumental in helping us get this started. What it basically does is it's going to help us impact and strengthen the principal pipeline. It's going to help us with aspiring. It's going to help us with assistant principals, and moving people to transformational and transformative type principalship. The bill would create, or will create, the Alabama Principal Leadership Development System, which will be the overarching umbrella under which everything goes. It will require the development of new leadership standards and a principal leadership framework, which will guide the development of the program. And it will also allow principals and assistant principals who complete the program to receive a $10,000 salary supplement for principals and a $5,000 salary supplement for assistant principals. And then there's another piece, much like the national board, that will allow for an extra amount for principals and assistant principals who work in high poverty schools, lower performing, harder to staff schools as they develop their evaluation system, which is also a requirement in the bill. And they will be working on student growth, student achievement, and school climate. Those are three big things that we really want our leaders to focus on growing so that they can have a positive impact on the students under their care. Okay, so that is part of what we're doing. Now, the timeline is pretty simple. This fall, each school administrator, assistant principal, and principal will have to develop a comprehensive professional learning plan, which will be implemented in the 24-25 school year, centered around the 5 extra days of high quality professional learning that will occur. And that's something that's going to help grow our leaders. And then that's going to be phased in 24-25. And then the next thing, and here we go, we're about to have a prize drawing. Sorry about that. So let's see if I can help that with this.
Right here. Not really.
I don't know if that helps or not.
You're good.
Okay. And so the 24-25 school year is where the PLPs will be put together. And then 27-28, there will be a new evaluation system, okay, that they'll be doing and working with that. And then by 29-30, there will be a Principal Leadership Academy. Now that's going to be designed by the design team that Dr. Mackey will oversee. That design team will have 3 principals appointed by class, 3 assistant principals appointed by class, 3 teachers appointed by AEA, 2 superintendents appointed by SSA, 2 board members appointed by AASB, 2 at-large members appointed by A+ College Ready, 4 appointees from the governor's office, and then Dr. Mackey will have an opportunity to appoint those he deems necessary. Another piece of this is the mentoring program. I'm very excited about the mentoring program for all new principals. I originally wanted to do mentoring for every principal in the state, but that's something we'll hopefully can grow it to that. But in the 24-25 school year, we will phase in mentoring programs, okay, for all first and second year principals. This is going to be very impactful, we hope, something that we're designing as we speak. Some of our systems already have a good mentoring program, and we will not supersede that or go in there. If Dr. Mackey deems that the local group is doing a great mentoring program, then they can do that because they'll have high quality mentoring already occurring. But this will be something we can put in place to help our new leaders grow with a mentor. Eventually, we hope it will have the full for everybody. So that's essentially what we're doing. It can be very impactful. The latest data, we have meta-analyses that have shown that the teachers has the number one impact on school and learning, on student learning. A close second has always been the principal. We have 2 new analyses that indicate that the principal actually has as big an impact, and in some cases an even bigger impact on student learning. And that's something that we pride ourselves on, providing high quality professional learning. We also do a lot of things with those entities I mentioned earlier. We continue to work closely with A+ College Ready to ensure that we are doing everything we can to give our school leaders what they need to be successful. So I'm very excited about this. We have a lot of principals and assistant principals around the state who are excited about this. I really think the work we're doing together, and when I say we, I'm talking about all the entities, the Senate, the House of Representatives, the governor's office. Everyone has really worked hard to help us give our professionals the opportunities and goals they need to move forward. So that's a quick overview. I hope that it has been helpful. And I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all get on the webinar, and we'll do my best to get that back to you.
All right, Dr. Wilson, thank you so much for taking time out of your conference to share your information with us this morning. It sounds like a great opportunity to build some leadership. That's something that industry is always grappling with as well. And as Workforce Council's always stipulated, it's K through 12 education is the foundation of building a workforce. So we're looking to work with y'all in any way we can.
And IU, so anything we can do, you just let us know. Thank you very much.
So as Dr. Morton has written, leadership matters, and that leadership program sounds like a great opportunity for Alabama to move forward. So thanks again. Get back to your conference, and we appreciate your time. Well, that wraps it up for today's webinar, and we appreciate all the speakers today, Nick and Nick Moore from the Governor's Office, Donnie Jones, Mr. Otto Cat from Washington, Josh Blades, and Dr. Vic Wilson. So thank you all for joining us and taking time out of your day. Remember, you can see these webinars at any time. They're posted on the AlabamaWorks.com website. So until next month, we'll meet you on July 10th at 9 a.m. Have a good month.
Great job, everybody. Thanks for your help.
Thanks.
All right. See y'all next time.
Appreciate you.